Hey there, students. Thank you for being part of this presentation. My name is Luis Silva, and today we're looking at world history, the Russian Revolution. What will we learn today? Today we're going to analyze the destabilization of Europe in the collapse of the great empires, include the Romanov and the Habsburg dynasties. Let's move on. In the 1700s, Tsar Peter the Great expanded and was able to modernize Russia. Peter introduced into Russia Western-style navy, fashion, and also city planning. But in the 1800s, Russia failed to keep pace with the rapid changes taking place in Western Europe. The Enlightenment led to new democratic reforms throughout Europe. In Russia, the Romanov Tsar continued to rule as absolute monarch. Tsars like Alexander III used secret police to monitor citizens, censor the media, and sent political prisoners to labor camps in Siberia. Tsars organized pogroms or violent attacks against ethnic minorities like Jewish and Poles in Russia, as you can see from the image to your left-hand side. The Industrial Revolution made European militaries and economies the strongest in the world. Russia's industry was not doing too well. It lagged behind Europe, had few railroads, and most citizens were poor farmers. Russia committed to industrialization, but it led to poor wages, long hours, and people were very, very unhappy. Russia used its industry, built a respectable navy, but had problems mass producing weapons. And this was a problem because most European nations were able to produce weapons quickly and fast, and Russia was not able to accomplish this. In the year 1894, Czar Nicholas II came to power, but failed to address major problems from 1904 to 1917. When Russian liberals called for democratic reforms, Nicholas II ordered his secret police to persecute those callings for reforms. In 1904, Russia and Japan went to war over Manchuria as well as Korea. Russia's humiliating loss to Japan exposed weaknesses in the nation's military and also in the government. Losing the Russo-Japanese War set off a series of riots among commoners who were unhappy with Nicholas' government. In the year 1905, Russian commoners met outside the Tsar's Winter Palace to demand better working conditions, right to form unions, and also a democratic constitution. The protest became known as the Bloody Sunday, when the Tsar guards fired into the crowd. Riots broke out across Russia because of this incident. People were very unhappy, and they thought that the Tsar had acted very bad by killing innocent people. In 1905, Nicholas II agreed to a new constitution that created a Duma, or a parliament, and also a limited monarchy. But the Duma was basically useless because Nicholas decided to ignore it. The Tsar's unpopularity and failure of the government to respond to problems increased calls for socialism. Socialists demanded that the government control all means of production to create an equal society. Karl Marx developed a radical form of socialism called communism, in which the working class led a revolution, seized property, and shared all wealth without a government. As you can see to the right, you have Mr. Karl Marx. You're more than welcome to pause this video so that you can read about his way of thinking. Radical workers, peasants, and soldiers began to form councils called Soviets that held meetings and also assumed control over local governments. To the right, you have the different economic systems and how they operate. For example, you see that all the way to the top, you have more government control, it's communism, and less government control is called anarchism. In 1903, a radical socialist named Vladimir Lenin formed the Bolsheviks, a group that supported a revolutionary overthrow of the Russian government. Lenin became the leader of this movement. But Vladimir Lenin left Russia to avoid being arrested by the Tsar, and obviously he did not want to die in the hands of the secret police. Lenin waited for an opportunity to return and lead his revolution in Russia. Russia's involvement in World War I proved to be the fatal blow to Czar Nicholas' support in Russia. The Russian military was no match for the German army. Remember that Russia had fallen behind in industry. They were not able to create and manufacture weapons rapidly, while the Germans had all of these capabilities, had the best military, had the best weapons, and the Russians were no match for the Germans at this point. Russia had difficulty producing weapons for soldiers on the front. Food shortages were common for troops and civilians. The lack of trains slowed supplies and communication. Russia drafted 15 million soldiers, and nearly 7 million were killed or wounded. In addition, 1.5 million civilians died. As you can see from the image to your right, people were dying in the millions, and this brought desperation to the Russian people. Tsar Nicholas refused to pull Russia out of the war and went to the Eastern Front to personally take command of the army. Nicholas left his wife, Alexandra, in charge of the day-to-day operations of the Russian government. To help cure her hemophiliac son Alexei, she relied on a mystic named Rasputin. Many Russians feared that Rasputin was controlling the royal family, and they went ahead and killed him. By the early 1917, citizens were rioting across Russia demanding an end to the monarchy and to World War I. Here you have a picture that demonstrates how angry they were with the Tsar, and they really wanted for the monarchy to end and for Russia to exit World War I. In March, Czar Nicholas II abdicated, left the throne, and the Duma created a provisional or a temporary government. There you have the newspaper headlines which demonstrate what was happening in Russia. Vladimir Lenin returned to Russia and led the Bolsheviks in the Russian Revolution in November 1917. Lenin's message was peace, land, and bread, which helped him gain popularity among the Russian people. Bolshevik Red Guards seized control of the provisional government and declared themselves the new government leaders of Russia. The Bolsheviks arrested and also executed the Romanovs, which ended 300 years of rule by czars in Russia. The image to your left shows you how the royal family, the Romanovs, were actually killed. After the success of the Bolshevik Revolution, Lenin announced major reforms in Russia. Lenin ordered all farmlands to be distributed among the peasants. Lenin also gave control of the factories to the workers. Vladimir Lenin also went ahead and signed a truce with Germany and gave up huge territories in order to get Russia out of the war. As you can see here from this image, all of that brownish, greenish areas were the areas that Russia had to give up in order to exit the war with dignity after having so many people die. The Russian Revolution led to a civil war between the Bolshevik Red Army and the White Army, or in this case, the White Army being people who wanted a new czar, democracy, or land back. Now, Britain, France, and the United States supported the White Army, to get Russia back into World War I. But in this case, Vladimir Lenin had the strongest army and the support of the people. After 3 years of fighting, the Red Army won and Lenin became the unquestionable leader of Russia. In 1922, Vladimir Lenin renamed Russia the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the USSR. Lenin created the Communist Party, which ruled the Soviet Union as a dictatorship. And here we have evolution of communist thought. To the left you have Karl Marx, and to the right you have Vladimir Lenin. You're more than welcome to pause this video so that you can read how these two individuals thought was best for the world and their countries. In the year 1917, Vladimir Lenin led the Bolshevik in an overthrow of the Russian government. And here you have the causes and effects of the two Russian revolutions in 1917. Once again, you're more than welcome to pause this video so that you can review each component or each part carefully. Vladimir Lenin was able to transform Russia into the Soviet Union, the world's first socialist government, and created the Communist Party to rule the nation. But Vladimir Lenin did not get to enjoy all of this power, as in 1922 he suffered a stroke and died in 1924. Lenin's death led to a struggle for power in the USSR. By 1927, Joseph Stalin outmaneuvered his rivals and was able to gain control of the Soviet Union. Stalin quickly created a totalitarian state in which he had total control of the government and also people's lives. The Communist Party. Stalin was a totalitarian dictator who transformed the USSR into a police state. Stalin led the Great Purge to eliminate potential rivals in the Communist Party. He was able to execute between 8 to 13 million people. Stalin used propaganda and censorship to control information and began education programs to teach communist ideals and loyalty to Russian children. Now let's move on to the 5-year plans. Stalin created a series of 5-year plans to overhaul the Soviet Union. Stalin seized control of the economy and set high production quotas on steel, coal, oil, and electricity. Stalin's 5-year plans dramatically improved Soviet industry and helped modernize the military. As you can see to your right, you can see that coal production went up in Russia, and the steel production also went up. Not by a lot, but still it went up. Now let's move on to collectivization. Stalin seized 25 million acres of private farm and combined them into large government-controlled collective farms. 90% of all peasants lived and worked on collective farms. As you are able to see here from the images to the right hand side, the bottom, you see how people were working, children were working, and everybody was working for the common good. This was hard labor, but this was the plan that was set in motion by Joseph Stalin. People working together, people producing food for everybody. Agricultural production improved in the USSR, but farming was still inefficient, and peasants resented having their land taken from them. You are more than welcome to pause this video in order to read a little bit about the Ukrainian kulaks. This is very important information if you need to review it. Let's move on. Now, in terms of individual rights, Stalin declared men and women equal in the USSR. Women's rights increased as women could vote and join the Communist Party. Women were expected to work in factories and on collective farms like men. Stalin attacked all religion and created a nation of atheists, no emphasis on religion. Stalin ordered destruction of Orthodox churches and Jewish synagogues. The Russian Revolution left a legacy not only in Russia but around the entire world, in which many nations turned to communism and many nations turned to capitalism. And this was a struggle that lasted for many decades around the world. We have come to the end of this presentation. Please make sure to subscribe, and I will see you in the next presentation.